We're going to share it on just two more platforms and then we will be good to go. Stay tuned. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Good evening, David. Okay, we are done sharing it and we are ready to roll. Okay, let's close this and here we go. Oh wow, Noah's on. Noah's on a week after his wedding. 2 weeks, 10 days. Noah, 10 days after the wedding and you're on class. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
I expect you very soon to bring your bride with you to the class. Anyhow, we are ready to roll. Everyone mute yourselves. It is Parshas Tzav. It is the second portion in the book of Leviticus, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. First, I'd like to take a moment, first of all, to wish a refuah shlema, to wish a speedy recovery to Jan, who comes to our class every week. She is struggling with some the Jan from Arizona, who's dealing with some heavy-duty flu, and Hashem should bench her to have a speedy recovery and come back to join us sooner than later. I'd also like to take a moment, just a moment of reflection, a moment of commemoration to dedicate tonight's class in the memory of a real mensch, person who I had the honor of meeting, person who was very close, I venture to say even a form of a chassid of the Rebbe, but a man who brought so much Yiddishkeit and so much pride in Yiddishkeit to the American community and to the community at large, and that is Senator Joe Lieberman, who passed away just a few hours ago. Truly an incredible man, and I am honored to be able to give a shir and dedicate it to a person that did so much for our people and for humanity. Yehei Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing. If you're in the Connecticut area, his funeral will be on Friday at the Ohev Shalom, the Orthodox Shul in Stamford, Connecticut. That being said, let's get into business here. So we are in the portion of Tzav. We are going to open up our Chumash, the life Chumash that we use here at the Shul, and we are going to open it to... No, we're going to open it to third reading, page 627. And it says as follows. We're going to discuss the Thanksgiving offering, the Korban Toida. In Judaism, we have a specific offering. It's a form of a peace offering, although it has some differences than a peace offering. It's called a Korban Toida, the Thanksgiving offering. We're going to discuss when we're obligated to bring a Thanksgiving offering. In Judaism, everything's specific, even when you're going to bring a Thanksgiving offering. So if your stocks go up in Wall Street, that's not a reason to bring a Thanksgiving offering. There's a specifics for when you could bring a donation offering, a neder, an offering that you vow to the temple. There's a lot of things you can bring. Thanksgiving offerings are specific, and we're going to talk about not only the specificity of it, but also the order of it, and how Rashi refers to it, how the Talmud refers to it, how Tosfos refers to it, how the Tehillim, where it originates in the book of Psalms, refers to it, and we're going to get some heavy doses of experiencing Thanksgiving. So it says like this. This is the law of the peace offering, which you should bring to God. If he is bringing it as a Thanksgiving offering, you should offer it along with the Thanksgiving offering 10 unleavened loaves mixed with oil, 10 unleavened wafers smeared with oil, 10 loaves of unleavened bread baked from flour, which then is scalded and mixed with oil, along with 10 loaves of leavened bread. He would bring his bread offering along with Thanksgiving peace offering. He should offer to the priest one bread out of each of the 4 types of bread, offering as a donation to God. These breads belong to the priest, who dashes the blood of the peace offering. And then there's the meat part, and it says as far as the meat, you bring, should be eaten on the day it's offered up, should not leave any over until the morning. So most peace offerings, you get to eat it for 2 days and 1 night. So let's say I bring it this afternoon. Let's say today on Wednesday, on the 17th of Adar, I went and brought a peace offering to the temple. I can eat it today, I can eat it tonight, I can eat it tomorrow. That's with regular peace offerings. A Thanksgiving offering, you have until tonight at midnight to finish it. So that's one of the differences between a Thanksgiving offering and a regular peace offering. And then later on, it tells us that you can bring, if you're bringing a Thanksgiving offering, you can bring it from any kosher animal. So it could be from a goat, from a sheep, from a cow. It does not have to be a specific animal. And it tells us that you're bringing 40 loaves of bread, 10 of each type, leavened, unleavened, baked with this oil. With that, 40 loaves of bread are brought to the temple with your Thanksgiving offering. 4 of them, so 1 out of each 10, is given to the priest who does the job on your behalf by sprinkling the blood and bringing it onto the altar. 36 of the loaves you get to enjoy with your family and close friends. Parts of the Thanksgiving offering you get to enjoy as well, but the chaza and the shoik hayamin, the right foreleg, as well as it's called the breast. But if it's a cow, for example, it's not specific. So it's the front part from the neck of the cow going down, towards the front. When the cow is standing up, the front part. The front part beneath. I wish I had a picture to show you, but there's parts of the animal that belong to the Kohen. It's a gift to the priest, including the 4 loaves of bread, and the rest you go celebrate your Thanksgiving. So the general rule is that today, when there is no temple, when there's no offerings, there's no sacrifices, when you bench Hagoimel, when you make the special blessing at the Torah, Hagoimel chayavim toiv malani toiv, the God who brought great kindness to my life, etc. That blessing is a reflection, is the code of Jewish laws expression for the Thanksgiving that we give to God. That's the general gist. I mean, you can obviously you sit here with every single detail of the Thanksgiving offering, but that's the general idea of the actual Thanksgiving offering. Then you have like this, the Talmud in the tractate of Brachos, the first tractate of the Talmud, on page 54b, says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Arba tzrichin lahodos, that the 4 must offer thanks to God with a Thanksgiving offering and special blessing. Who are they? Yardei Hayam, seafarers, people that cross the sea. Hayolchei Midbaros, those who walk through the desert. Misha Yechaylev v'nisrape, someone was ill and they recovered. Misha Yechabush v'beis asurim v'yatza, and someone who was incarcerated in prison and went out, meaning he was emancipated, he was freed from prison. All of these are obligated to bring a Thanksgiving offering to God. So again, Talmud says, in the order of the way the Talmud says it, those who travel overseas, which today means by plane, back then meant by some raft between Cuba and America, or between Haiti and America. You go through the desert. If you were ill, deathly ill or pretty ill, and you became better, and that, by the way, includes, car accidents and giving birth, anything that's dangerous. And then if you were imprisoned and you came out, it's Arba Tzrichin Lahodos. Those are the 4 that are biblically mandated to give a Thanksgiving offering. Hagoimel. Yeah. So I just said that Hagoimel is today's representation or substitute for the Thanksgiving offering. All of these 4 are reflected in Psalm 107. So next time you have your book of Psalms, Psalm 107, Kapitel Kuf Zayin, is a lengthy psalm, and in that psalm it goes through all of these 4 items, and it refers to it with the terms Yoidu Lashem Chazdai, which means they are grateful to God for his loving kindness, and his wonders for mankind. In other words, this expression of gratitude that a human being going through a very challenging reality and comes out on the other side and survives, gets to bring a Thanksgiving offering, that is reflected in Psalm 107. And the Talmud over here in Brachos goes through about, goes through about 15 different nuances and details in Psalm 107 and concludes that these four, based on that Psalm 107, these are the four situations in which you're obligated to bring a Thanksgiving offering. So again, the Talmud, in the order of the Talmud, it is those that travel overseas, those that go through deserts, those that are ill and become better, and those that were in jail and they are free. Now, just because I like making sure my beautiful students are well educated, we don't like having ignorant Jews. There's enough of those on Twitter. We don't need any more. And so the Tosfos, the great Toseftas, which are primarily the Rishonim, the 10th century, 11th century, 12th century commentators, Talmudic sages who lived in France and Germany. Some of them were Rashi's grandchildren, like Rabbeinu Tam. So Tosfos, right there in the Tractate of Brachot, asks as follows. He says, if you open up the book of Psalms, you'll see that the order is not like the Talmud. Even though the Talmud is quoting Psalm 107 to teach us the four situations in which you have to give gratitude, the order in the book of Psalms is actually, it starts with desert, then it goes to then it goes to prison, then it goes to ill people, and the last one is those that travel overseas. And yet in the Talmud, it was seas, desert, ill, that become better, and then emancipated. So Tosfos says, now hold on. Mr. Talmud, you great Talmudic sages, Ravina, Rav Ashi, the great authors of the Babylonian Talmud, why did you quote the Psalm, but also quote it out of order? And Tosfos, it's a very short Tosfos. Tosfos says, the Kron Nokat Seder HaMesukanim Yoser Tchila. King David in Psalms was giving us the order of those that are most dangerous. It was in the order of danger. The Talmud, being a more pragmatic book that's talking to people in their practical life, gave us the order of the most common. So when Psalms, it tells us danger. You want to talk about danger? The most dangerous of those four is someone that has to travel to the desert. Snakes, scorpions, dehydration, hunger, bandits, whatever you want is in the desert. The next one is if you're being held captive, if you're held in a prison. I know today when you say prison, people think of a nice federal penitentiary, which is not so pretty either. But when you said prison back in Talmudic days or captivity, that's a very different thing. The third one in level of danger is a person becoming ill that gets healed. And then the last one is someone that goes on a raft and goes across the sea. Everyone does it. So what's the big whoop? But the Talmud is not telling you based on the list of items that are most dangerous. It's telling you based on that which is most common. Right? And what's most common? So the Talmud tells us first, those that go by sea, because people travel all the time. It's the most common form of travel is people going over water. Today we don't feel it as much again because you're going by plane. And I remember that time when I was Delta upgraded me and I was sitting in business class coming from Minneapolis to Bozeman, and the flight attendant came in and said, in case of emergency, if we land on water, and I said, man, you know that about 15 minutes after takeoff, heading west to Montana from Minnesota, there ain't no water. If we're crashing, we're hitting a mountaintop. What exactly is your recommendation we do with the flotation device when we hit, Mount Rushmore? And everyone was silent, and the whole business class burst out laughing, and she burst out laughing. What are you going to say? They like tape recorders. They say that, But so in the Talmud is saying what's most practical? Most practical is you're crossing the sea. That's the most common. What's the one that's next after that? Traveling in the desert, because travel is the most common. Then, if someone gets sick and they get better, it's also a common thing. It's not as common as traveling. It's not if people travel more than they get sick. People go through deserts more than they get sick. But the least common is going to jail or being held captive, unless, of course, you're near Yemen these days, and your chances are much higher. But generally, it's a much lower chance. So the Tosfos asks a good question and answers it. There's the order of danger, and there's the order of common. What's common in your life? Beautiful. A shtickle Gemara, you learned a little bit of Talmud, you learned a beautiful Tosfos. Okay, now we can go home. Except we can't go home. Why can't we go home? Because if I only taught you Gemara and Tosfos, then I wouldn't be a Chabad rabbi. I have to teach you heavy doses of mysticism and you want your money's worth, yeah. And so I'm sharing with you a beautiful idea that I learned from the Rebbe. It's actually one of the longest and most detailed Talmudic addresses that I've ever seen from the Rebbe, and it's connected to a multitude of discussions, and it's from the spring of 1968. So in the spring of 1968, in Nisan, the month of Nisan, the month of Pesach 1968, the Rebbe addressed it, and he asks as follows. Because here it gets interesting. I told you what the Talmud says, and I told you what the order of Talmud and the order of Psalms. But then we have Rashi in our Torah portion, right here in the Torah portion of Tzav. So Shabbos, you're going to be sitting in shul. You're going to hear the rabbi told you about the order from the Talmud. He told you about the order in Psalms. And then you're going to open up your own Chumash in shul, and you're going to look at Rashi on the verse, and it's going to say, you know what the order is? The order is sea, crossing the sea, going through the desert, going out of prison, and a sick person getting better. So it's not the order of the Talmud. It's not the order of Psalm 107. It's Rashi in his Pirush, in his commentary on our Parsha, on Parsha Tzav, on the verse about the Karban Todah, about the Thanksgiving offering. And the question is, number one, why does Rashi not give us the order either of the Talmud or of Psalms? Why does he have to make up his own order? And it gets even a little bit more just for your own intellectual stimulation. It becomes even more interesting because if you look at the Talmud, it gives you two of the miracles, right? Two of the success stories of overcoming and being thankful. It gives you two of them in the plural and two of them in the singular. It tells us traveling by overseas and traveling through the desert. Yordei Hayam and Hoylche Midbarius. It tells us both of those in the plural. And the two in individual terms, in singular terms, are an ill person who becomes better and an incarcerated person who becomes emancipated. It makes sense because when people travel overseas or when people travel through the desert, they generally travel in groups. Versus getting sick, you generally do alone unless it's COVID and or plague and being in jail generally unless you're part of the mob or part of a big group. Generally you get held captive all by yourself. But Rashi here, in our Torah portion, right, he mentions traveling overseas and going through the desert and those who come out of prison, all in the plural. He only mentions getting better from an illness, healing from an illness in the singular. So not only does he change the order, he even changed the plurality versus the singularity when it comes to the individual items. And I guess that's part of the question. Why does Rashi say an individual who is sick that becomes healed in the individual, but when it comes to the other three, traveling overseas, going through the desert, and coming out of prison, he mentions them in the plural? And here's in this 1968 discussion, the Rebbe brings to life such a Rebbe-like approach to Torah versus reality and how they're really intertwined. And you really have to focus on the nuances to really appreciate look at a simple Rashi. And if you would have read this Rashi 50 times, 50 times you would have read this Rashi, you wouldn't pick up on all those questions and how it's different from the Talmud because it's four. These are the same four. Who pays attention to the order? And who pays attention if Rashi doesn't have the Talmud order, doesn't have the Psalms order, and especially the details of the singularity versus the plural, the plural versus the singular in the statements themselves. The Rebbe says something about human nature, and that is, it's much easier for a person to hear about something, a discussion about something, and be instructed about something if it's familiar to them. Right? If you tell a guy that lives in the Bahamas how to drive on the snow, first of all, they're not interested in hearing about it. Second of all, it means nothing to them because if they've never tried it on the snow, it's not going to affect them in any positive way. And they'll end up in Montana coming from the Bahamas, even if you told them exactly what to do, and they'll probably crash. Remember when Kardashian? Remember when Kardashian crashed in Belgrade, and everyone, like 2009, she went into a ditch. Of course, she went into a ditch. She came from California. Where else would she go? Not into a ditch. So everyone, oh my God, Kardashian crashed like everyone else crashes. If they don't know what you're doing on the snow, you're going to crash. My point is, the Rebbe's point is that when something's personal to you and you can relate to it personally, it has a whole different depth in how much it permeates and penetrates into your psyche, into your way of seeing the world. And who was the one giving the instruction about the Korban Todah, the original Thanksgiving offering? Who was giving that instruction? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, talking to who? To the generation of Jews that left Egypt that were now in the desert. The Doir HaMidbar, the generation that was in the desert. Therefore, the Rebbe says it's only logical that he would speak to them in a way that they can relate to based on the order of their experience, their own experience. The Talmud is talking about the things that are most common. Psalms, King David is talking about the things that are most dangerous. Moses was talking to his flock. He was talking to the Jewish people who endured the exodus from Egypt. They went through the splitting of the sea. They're now in the desert. And therefore, he needed to speak to them in a way that they can fully relate to it. And the best way to do that is to go in the order of what they experienced. And by the way, even though back then in the desert, they were not obligated to bring a Korban Todah, a Thanksgiving offering for these things, because in the desert and throughout the whole Exodus, they were protected from God with a supernatural way, which means it wasn't a natural act of thanksgiving. Nevertheless, we are able to garner lessons in how Thanksgiving is supposed to be and how the Korban Todah and our gratitude is supposed to come about. And therefore, Rashi in our Parsha is going to tell you the way it went. How did it go? It started with Yordei Hayam. The first miracle the Jews were being taught about Thanksgiving is Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. Right? They went through the sea, literally in their case, which happened right after they came out of Egypt, and they survived. Oh, no. They had they hadn't really traversed in the desert until after they got through the sea. So the first experience they had was going through the sea. So therefore, Rashi says, number one, Yordei Hayam, in the plural. They went through the sea, in Lashon Rabbim, in the plural, because they all went together. Then the next thing they did after the sea was they started their traversing, just the basics, right? They were going to go now from the sea to Israel. So they had to travel through the desert. So Helchem Midbarius, again in the plural, they're going through the desert, and there's danger in the desert. So for that, they have to learn that you have to give gratitude. But then, after the sin of the golden calf, now they're not only traversing in the desert, now they're becoming incarcerated in the desert. Now they're being told that they're going to spend another 39 years in the desert. So now they're going from a state of just traveling through the desert into a state of captivity. Maybe not captivity by an oppressor. Maybe it's in this case it was captivity by God. But they were claustrophobic. They're locked up on this island called the desert. They can't go anywhere. They're literally, right? They were decreed that they're going to be incarcerated in the desert. As it says in Psalm 107, sitting in a state of darkness and death. And therefore, the third thing that Moshe taught them in the order of their experience was emancipation from captivity. And again in the plural, because they did that together. But then he came to the fourth one. Rashi comes to the fourth one. What's the fourth? And Moshe had to teach them that. What's the fourth one? Illness for which you need to be healed. The Jews had no illness in the desert. There was no illness. They were in a state of godly protection. Yeah, if God wanted to hurt them, he hurt them. You mean the snake? Right, because God was killing them, and so he had Moshe hold the copper snake. Very good, the copper. But that was a plague from God. It wasn't a natural illness for which you were going to potentially die, and then you're saved. It was right, and therefore, when it comes to the choilish and israpa, the individual who becomes ill and then becomes healthy, is healed. That's the only one that's referred to by Rashi in the singular, because they did not experience it collectively, the Jewish people as a whole. It was if you're ever in a situation where an individual gets sick and potentially dying, and then they get better, then you have to bring a Thanksgiving offering. But it was because it was theoretical at that point, because they hadn't experienced it collectively. That's the only one that Moshe referred to, that Rashi refers to in the singular, versus the other three, which is based on their own experience, which was done in the plural. Now, by the way, some of you may wonder, and it would be a good question, that if you're going in the order of things that the Jews experience, and the Rebbe asked this question too, if you're going in the order of things that the Jews experience, and you say the first one is the splitting of the sea, it seems a little off.
Why not start earlier?
With what? The Exodus, which is what? Emancipation from captivity. Right, but the Jews left Egypt. Why is that not included in Rashi's order? Right, maybe, says the Rebbe, it should be the emancipation, which means a captive person who's emancipated, who's freed, should be one, and then you go to sea, desert, illness. Why didn't it start with that? Well, you mean being in the desert is part of the desert, and you already covered when they left Egypt. Why is that not listed as number one? So the Rebbe says something very interesting, which I think will give us all some thought. And that is, you can only be considered truly captive if you're in a place where there is no exit strategy, where basically you're in a state of imprisonment, like solitary confinement or in a prison cell, right? You're locked up in a place. Like the Jews were in this area of the desert, they could not leave. They had nowhere else to go. In Egypt, says the Rebbe, yes, the Jews were in a terrible state of slavery, but don't forget, and a lot of times we do, that in the land of Goshen, which is a part of Egypt where many of the Jews, the tribe of Levi, would sit and learn Torah there, and that was a place where the Jews got to live. So yes, the slavery was horrific, and the torture done to their children. We're not in any way trying to sanitize what the Egyptians did to the Jews, but it wouldn't be the good example for emancipation from captivity, because when you're being held in a country, but you have an outlet in Goshen, it's not the natural form of captivity for which you would want to be emancipated. Therefore, we don't start with the Exodus. We start with the splitting of the sea, and then journeying through the desert, and then being stuck in the desert without being able to go to Israel or back to Egypt, so you're stuck. And that's the emancipation from captivity, which are all three things that the Jewish people did collectively. And then also, by the way, if someone gets ill and becomes better. And when you analyze the halacha regarding what? The order? No, there's no halacha about the order. You definitely have to bring all, if you want to know, I'll read to you actually straight from the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, actually, the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, they say as follows. This is a quote from the Code of Jewish Law. Those who go to sea and successfully reach their destination, those who walk in the desert and arrive at a settlement, a sick person who was healed, and one who was in prison and was released must offer thanks with a blessing. Blessed are you who bestows goodness on the unworthy, who has bestowed on me much good. Those who hear this person say the blessing respond, and he who bestowed much good on you continue to bestow on you much good selah for all eternity, which is what we do at the Torah. And again, that would be the same thing if there was a temple or tabernacle as it relates to Thanksgiving offering. Every day in our prayers, every single morning, we say Mizmor L'Soida. It's Psalm 100, a psalm of thanksgiving. The idea of giving thanks, Moeda'ani, the first words in our mouth is giving thanks. But the idea that specifically when you are in a situation that can be deadly, I can only listen. Traveling overseas, okay. I mean, if you're flying United, I mean, there's different levels in how you bench Hagoyim, depending on what airline you take. If the door falls off, it doesn't fall off. If you fly on a Boeing versus on an Airbus, soon the sages of Israel are soon going to be discussing. If you fly in an Airbus, this should be the blessing. If you fly in a Boeing, make a double blessing. But all jokes aside, when in 2000. I want to say 21. Yeah, 2021, when I was driving here at the Highland in Bozeman, and Shoshana was with me in the car, and we got T-boned by a Domino pizza driver, and he totaled my car with me in it. And I came out with just a seatbelt bruise. And the next Shabbos in Shul, it was the only time I can remember saying Hagoimel and when you fly overseas, I don't feel it as much. It's important to do, but I didn't feel it as much. After that accident, there was a Thursday accident. Trust me, on Shabbos, that Hagoyim meant the world to me. And really, with an incredible, right, it's amazing how grateful we become. It becomes, people are not thinking, I didn't think about my silly car. That wasn't on my agenda. It was a brand new vehicle. But who cares? I walked out unscathed, except for the embarrassment of half of Bozeman seeing the other side of the road, beaten and bashed. But other than that, unscathed. And for that, you have to be grateful. Hashem is embedding something so powerful into our psyche because we take it for granted. How many times do people say, I was literally, it was an inch away, the truck almost went into me. Okay. Did you get up and say, thank you, Hashem? I did it. You know that song that we say, thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. How often do we actually just jump out of our seats and say, I don't know if you remember this image. For me, it's always going to remain etched in my heart and my mind. When I during COVID, during the harshest part, that first 4 or 5 months of COVID, I still remember sitting on the couch in my house and crying, watching the videos that every time a Jew survived from the hospital and they somehow miraculously came off the ECMO machine or came off the ventilator, which was very rare. Most of the people that went on to those machines never came off. But the people, I still remember this image of a guy coming home in Chicago. And he came home in a Hatzalah ambulance because he was far from fully recovered, but he was recovered enough to go home. And the entire neighborhood, everyone on their porches, and there's music blasting in the streets. They welcomed him home with everyone on their own porches dancing and singing, thank you, Hashem, right? And I remember that because I was sitting in Bozeman. We didn't have COVID back then. We didn't know what the heck was going on in the world. It was like this weird world. But to know that this family just got their father back, just got their son back, just got their brother back, just got their Zaidi back, and to know that we are a people that celebrates with gratitude, with deep-seated gratitude, not just, we're good at fetching. Everyone's good at fetching, but the Jews are super good at fetching. The soup's a little too cold. It's not exactly. I was in a restaurant in Miami just recently, just 2 weeks ago, my niece's wedding. We went to have breakfast somewhere, and I watched from the corner of my eye some poor Cuban waiter, getting told that the food it's not what I ordered. It is what I ordered. I'm like, it looked very delicious. I have no idea. And if you have to send it back, but Jews like fetching. It's okay. But if you're going to fetch, at least when there's so much to be grateful for, you can get on a plane and travel 17 hours, 19 hours to Singapore and survive. You went over the Pacific, you went over the whatever ocean. Right? We went to South Africa in the summer and we flew 16 hours from Atlanta to Johannesburg. And on the way back from Cape Town to Atlanta, we flew basically for 12 hours over the ocean. Could you imagine? If you would have told someone 60, 70 years ago that you're going to be going over the ocean for 15 hours without having to stop for a pit stop for gas, it's a miracle. Celebrate the miracle. Celebrate the traversing in the desert that you survived. You're at a doctor's office and they find the tumor and you survive and they get rid of the tumor and you're able to heal. Run and dance, saying thank you, Hashem. You're being held captive in whatever form that is, and you're being emancipated. Don't kvetch about the fact that you were held in prison. Celebrate the emancipation. Otherwise, are you really free if you're still stuck in the state of captivity? You're in a psychological prison. Free yourself. Celebrate. And the best way to free yourself from any of those experiences, you can focus on how hard it was to be ill. You can focus on how hard it is to be captive. You can focus on how hard it is to travel. Or you can focus on the fact that you've made it to the other side and you're still standing. It's an incredible, incredible way to see life. It makes me nuts. I was telling my personal trainer yesterday, that there's some people that resign themselves. They have like body ailments, right? And they resign. That's it. This is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And you speak, they're like 52 years old. What do you mean this is not going to be for the rest of your life? Go to doctors, go to naturopath doctors, go to acupuncture, go do whatever you got to do. What do you mean that's how you're going to be? Because you're lazy? Don't get stuck in that state. Go free yourself. And with a lot of incredible gratitude to Almighty God. And there's so much to be grateful for. Someone asked, I saw a clip the other day, and I'll conclude with that. I saw I could actually say what it is, it's not a secret. I saw a YouTube interview between Piers Morgan in England with Ben Shapiro, who's a Jewish guy here in America, who I happened to meet. He needed some kosher food in Montana a couple of years ago. And he asked him, how do you get away from the toxicity of what goes on social media, especially on X, on Twitter, which, by the way, it's extremely toxic. And he said something very interesting, Ben. He said, go outside. Go get in the dirt. Go into nature. And I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to me. I'm in Montana. Of course, we know that. And it was so empowering because he said, so often you get stuck in this online social media bubble and you see every crazy on earth, by the way, every crazy that never had a voice, found themselves a voice in social media, and they say the most insane, conspiratorial, really cuckoo things that come out of people's mouths. And it can be scary. Oh my gosh, there's so many people that hate us. First of all, you don't know how many of these creatures on Twitter are really bots and not humans. Second of all, yes, there's a segment of humanity that doesn't like us. They blame it on Gaza. They blame it on whatever. Today it's Gaza. Tomorrow it's this. Yesterday was something else. Go out into nature. And then he said, go speak to your neighbor. Go speak to people in your community. You're going to find out that most of the world are kind, gentle, sensitive people. And it really hit home for me because I believe that's really part of the cure. We can get so caught up in our political, ideological differences. We can get so caught up in the things that we're not grateful for. We can get so caught up with what's not good about America. And I was thinking about that. Yes, I have a lot of grievances about America these days. But more than my grievances, as a citizen, as a Jew living in America, I'm super grateful for the Constitution, for the founding fathers, for our system of government. And it's not perfect. It's not the Torah. The only thing that's perfect is the Torah. Any other government is imperfect. But it's given us an incredible opportunity to be Jews and celebrate our Judaism. It saved my grandfather from Europe. And sure, I can focus on all the Jews that were turned away by FDR, but I'm focusing on my grandfather who got permission to come. So we need to learn to really to incorporate that gratitude into our lives. And part of it is to get away from those chambers of negativity that are so seductive and so addictive. So they seduce you in, of course, seductive, addictive, and by the end, all it is depressing and maybe even fearful and scary. And like I told someone that called me many years ago, when someone, actually I can tell you who it was, when Donald Trump won the election in 2016, a member of the Jewish community said, what's going to be, Rabbi? They go, Rabbi, what's going to be? I said, listen, if it gets bad for the Jews, we'll move to Canada. We're just here on the border. We'll drive up north. And I said, if it doesn't work out in Canada, we'll drive to Greenland. And it sort of just calmed their nervous system, right? Because we think, oh my gosh, what's going to be? What do you mean what's going to be? Hashem runs the show. And therefore, just show your gratitude. You woke up in the morning, you were able to eat a fresh kale salad that's good for you. You're able to eat a delicious sandwich. You're able to daven 3 times a day. You're able to go into nature and take a hike. You're able to be married and be happy. You're able to celebrate the successes of your children and grandchildren. You're able to breathe air. Turn off the stinking TV. Get rid of your phone for 12, 15 hours a day and be a happy person. But the happiness begins with gratitude. And the Torah is teaching us that when you experience something challenging, super challenging, and you express gratitude, it will change your life for the better, because that gratitude in itself will really cultivate an attitude of gratitude in your life that will only have the other addiction, which is to never stop being grateful for all the good. So next time you're driving and you're jealous of the guy with the Tesla, just remember your Honda's just fine. If you don't have a flat, you're having a great day. You know how I know? Because ask the 9,000 people that do have flats and they'll tell you you're having a great day. So be grateful, be happy, be joyous, get rid of your jealousy and your animosity and your division. And remember, Hashem runs the show. And if you recognize that and are grateful for that, your life, however many years God has for you in this world, will be a life full of meaning, joy, and gladness. L'chaim, have a wonderful week. Actually, I maybe at a wedding, but I think I'm going to be back, God willing, next Wednesday night. So I should be fine. And we'll see you back here next Wednesday. Have a freilichen Woche. It's still Adar. We're still in the month of Adar. We still have almost 2 weeks left of the month of Adar. So it means it's still Ma'arbim B'Simcha. We still have extra moments of joy. Be joyous. Be upbeat. And remember, we kick butt. I'll see you later, sei gesund. And make it a happy one. No, I'm waiting for the honeymoon. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good.